Is this the season they can restore the roar? In Detroit, they're on Hard Knocks. Dan Campbell is inspiring people across the nation. Viewers get to see Jamal Williams in all of his personality, glory, and hey, by the way, quietly building a very nice roster up in Detroit. Joining me now from Locked On Lions, our pal Matt Dery. And Matt, there's been a little Lions hype. We have not been able to say that for a long time with this team. And so when you look at it, what are the reasons for fans to be excited that this year could be different?
First of all, it's great to hear the positivity coming out of you, Pete. Love that. Love that. Look, the bottom line is you can do all the Hard Knocks stuff you want, and all the Dan Campbell speeches and all the F-bombs and Jamal Williams and everything else. But the bottom line is yes, in the last 2 seasons, Brad Holmes, the general manager, has added some nice talent to the roster. When you draft high up, which the Lions have done over the last few years, you're able to get a Penei Sewell in the top 10, a TJ Hawkinson in the top 10, an Aiden Hutchinson in the top 2. So there's some pretty nice talent here. Is it ready to compete with the Green Bay Packers? I don't think so. But at least there's some positivity. They're very strong with the offensive line, and that's where you have to kind of build things is up front. And they feel like they're on their way a little bit here. And like you said, they become America's team a little bit, brother, with all this Hard Knock stuff. But so far, so good here in the preseason.
I think it speaks to the quality of coach that people think Dan Campbell is and his ability to build culture and inspire his players. Because when we watch him, we go, God, if I was in that room, I'd be ready to run through a brick wall for that guy. But to your point, there's a really strong offensive line. They put together a nice skill group with the receivers, drafting Jamison Williams, who we haven't even seen on the field. But Amon-Ra St. Brown has this inspired rookie season. They've got a nice group of backs. You mentioned TJ Hawkinson. So there's some players that you might actually draft in your fantasy football league on this team, even if that's just like the level of fan that you are. But you mentioned the expectations. Are they ready to compete? Okay, maybe not. So help me set reasonable expectations. We know what some expectations are. What are reasonable expectations for the Lions this year?
Vegas and our friends at BetOnline have said 6.5 wins. I think reasonable after a 3-win season last year, a very difficult schedule to come back with a lot of the same roster, but guys that wanted to come back, the same coaching staff, identical staff from a year ago that they can build around, and an easier schedule. And getting to play the Bears twice will help, right? And you know that, Pete. So I think that 6, 7, 8 wins could be there for the taking. They've got to get some breaks. They have to finish games. Last year they should have beaten Pittsburgh. They didn't. They tied. They should have beaten the Ravens. They didn't. They lost. Minnesota, the game was won, and they choked it away. So they got to finish some of those games. Goff has to have a better year than he did a year ago. But like we talked about, a healthy O-line, Ragnow up front, with Decker and Sewell and some of those skill position players. And hey, let's say you get Jamison Williams November 1st, and he, as Brad Holmes likes to say, the GM takes the top off the defense, then you might have something here. But they're much improved in that wide receiver room. That's where they were very weak a year ago.
What do you think in terms of tangible benefits? We know the sort of intrinsic benefit of having a rah-rah head coach. Is there tangible benefits to what Dan Campbell does for this team? Because he seems to have delegated a lot of the football stuff to his very, very impressive staff, a lot of former players. Aaron Glenn is a hot name to potentially get a head coaching run here in the next year or two. What do you think the on-field benefit is from someone like Dan Campbell?
Well, this, Peter, being in the NFC North. Detroit has been a whipping boy for so many years and a butt of so many jokes. And Campbell provides some entertainment value for sure if you're watching Hard Knocks, but inside the locker room, and when I talk to some people inside the building, they all say everybody's on board. Everybody is in lockstep with Campbell. Dan is in lockstep with his general manager, Brad Holmes. There's no infighting, whether it's John Dorsey, Ray Agnew, guys in the front office, Chris Spielman, all these guys that maybe want to chime in and say, hey, listen, let's draft this guy, or let's trade for this guy, or maybe we don't want to keep this guy. But Brad makes the final call. He's got the ear of all those folks, but they're all on the same page, which for years here in Detroit has always been a bugaboo. They just have not been able to be connected. And so, yeah, that should result in some better results. I think, like I said, last year, the schedule was murder and the roster was not very good. Now, Goff in year 2, system's pretty much the same. Campbell's likely going to call the plays. Glenn's back coaching the defense. Aubrey Pleasant's back coaching the DBs. He's a really good assistant. And you've seen what Deuce Staley can do as an assistant head coach and how impressive he's been on Hard Knocks. So yeah, there's a lot of positivity. Still worried a little bit about the defense and certainly some of the games on the schedule. Week 1 should not be easy with Philly. They run it well. The Lions' interior defensive line is a little shaky. So those are things to think about, but the optimism here in Detroit is much higher than it was a year ago.
Stay up to date on the Detroit Lions by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and the Locked On Lions podcast on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.